Hello, everyone. This is Cody Lee of BlackCatBooks.org, author of Eye of the Dragon, Cruel and Beautiful Rabbit Hole, Lore and Fray, and the upcoming Jaw of the Dragon, releasing June 10th, 2023. So I've spent the past week playing Tears of the Kingdom. Every free moment I've had, every time I've had like a spare moment to just spend some time with the game, I've been playing it. I've gotten a good ways into it. I believe I'm nowhere near the end. The way it looks, I'm about at the halfway point, probably like way below that, considering I fully intend to like do everything this game has to offer. But I've gotten pretty far into the game. I do know a good deal about the plot. I do know a good deal about the game and its mechanics. I've gotten to the point where like I feel like, when it comes to like character building wise and growth wise, the amount of shrines I've gotten, the amount of the map I've explored, like it feels like we're in the downswing, right? Like I have a pretty good idea of what this game is, and I can finally give a first impressions video. This game is so massive, so much more massive than something like The Witcher 3 or Red Dead Redemption 2 or Skyrim, that it was actually quite difficult to really put my feelings into words for the longest time, because it felt like there really is no other game like this. Because a lot of people tried to say this game is a DLC expansion. A lot of people tried like writing the sequel off, saying that like it's not going to be nearly as good as Breath of the Wild. And for a long time, I kind of felt the same way, because early on it feels like you're exploring the same kind of areas again. It feels like the new abilities don't really lead a lot to growth and development. It feels like it's the same song and dance, right? And I think that's kind of the game's core problem, right? Like if the game has any real flaw, it's that it's a sequel to one of the best games ever made, right? Whatever like Tears of the Kingdom did, no matter how good it was, how high quality, no matter like how innovative the mechanics, like there's no getting around the fact that it's the same map with the same setting, with the same characters, with a similar plot structure. Now, it's similar, right? It's similar to Breath of the Wild in a lot of ways, but the thing is, as I think back to my experience playing Breath of the Wild and just how that game ended, in like the most anticlimactic way possible, with like the Divine Beast attacking Ganon and like an extremely lame final boss, I already feel with Tears of the Kingdom, I'm a lot more invested in what's actually going on. Tears of the Kingdom, unlike Breath of the Wild, actually has a real plot. It has real stakes. It has real dynamics between the characters. It has a real plot progression. It has a real antagonist, right? With Breath of the Wild, it felt like you were kind of exploring this world and kind of like getting lore dumps near constantly. In Tears of the Kingdom, it actually feels like an active, ongoing plot, right? Like, Breath of the Wild, in a lot of ways, it feels like you're resolving everything that happened 100 years ago. All the major characters are dead. Like, Breath of the Wild was, like, structured very oddly for a game like that. And I imagine that was intentional on Nintendo's part. They didn't want to, like, overexert themselves with, like, a long, elaborate quest and stuff like that. Tears of the Kingdom really seems like a natural evolution of that, right? We have a lot more quest lines. We have a lot more characters. We have a lot more going on. We have a lot more, respect for your intelligence. And I do think that's kind of the way to look at Tears of the Kingdom, as like it's not really a DLC or a sequel, it's a part 2, right? Like this is the second half of Breath of the Wild, the greatest game ever made. Like it feels like in a lot of ways these games complete each other. Like it's not like Majora's Mask where it feels like a radically different experience. It feels like Tears of the Kingdom in a lot of ways is so intrinsically built into what Breath of the Wild was that I have a hard time believing that anyone who played and enjoyed Breath of the Wild wouldn't appreciate Tears of the Kingdom. And the fact that Tears of the Kingdom is so wildly different in its mechanics and its world building and its setting and the sheer amount of content it adds, you can't really write it off as a lazy derivative sequel either. Anyone who's saying this game is like a rehash for a DLC or uninspired or like the open world is empty is full of crap. In fact, I would say that the fact that they completely reused the map for this and completely made it feel fresh, new, organic, and just incredible it really just goes to show you just how good the map for Breath of the Wild actually was, right? Just like Tears of the Kingdom really makes you appreciate a lot of the minor characters from Breath of the Wild more, characters like Purah, Paya, Sidon, like Tulin, like Riju. A lot of these characters that like I didn't really think much of back in Breath of the Wild have become new favorites in the series. Like they've grown a lot in the past couple of years. Sidon has a fiance now. Like, actually, he marries her like after the quest line. Riju's grown up a lot. You have Yanobo started a company. Like it's interesting to see like the direction they take this. It feels like a wild departure from what Zelda is typically known for doing in a lot of ways. Like Breath of the Wild was, I hate to call it like a generic Zelda plot, but it was very straightforward. It was very basic, right? Like something terrible happened. You get brought back to life, and you have to rebuild your power and defeat Calamity Ganon, right? You win, and then Tears of the Kingdom comes out, and you get some more lore dumps as to the wild departures from typical Zelda lore. For example, like what exactly happened to Ganon, the founding of the kingdom, which we've never gone into before, like the nature of Zelda's powers. Like there's all these really interesting tidbits that seem to have been built off a lot of classic Zelda material. You have like references to Skyward Sword with like the flying islands. You have like Zelda and her powers explained. You have like Zelda. Honestly, I said in Breath of the Wild that Zelda was my least favorite incarnation of the character ever because she was so annoying and so like full of herself, and just like there was nothing likable with the character other than her love for science. Like that was actually pretty base, but like generally speaking, like Zelda in Breath of the Wild was unbelievably disappointing, right? Tears of the Kingdom does so much to like advance her characterization, advance her role in the plot, and make her come off as legit one of the most compelling, engaging, and based and red-pilled characters in the entire series. Like I love Zelda in this. You can't really explain it to people because spoilers, and like there's so many things like you still don't know about like what exactly happened. Like as I'm making this video now, I haven't even seen all the memories. Well, all of the memories, like you get all the dragon's tears, but then you like look at the menu and there's still like a couple of gaps. So I guess you unlock more of them at some point, but yeah, there's just so much that can be said about Zelda as a character, about her role in the plot, about like what she does for you, what she does for the kingdom, and like it just all comes together to create something that like just feels like Zelda is evolving, right? And I think that is like the main thing to take away from this, is that this isn't another Majora's Mask situation in which people were like successfully able to write off a sequel to like one of the best games ever made. This is a game that's as critically acclaimed as the original. In a lot of ways, I don't think anyone was expecting this, myself included. I was expecting this to be like a good game that would build off of Breath of the Wild in some interesting, unique ways, and still be relatively solid, but like be held back by like being by how similar it is. But that's really not the case. Like I've put so much time into this game and played it so much and enjoyed it so much. Like I think in certain ways, I never thought I would say this, I think in certain ways it is better than Breath of the Wild. I do think in certain ways there are certain things you can talk about, so things you can praise that are objectively better than Breath of the Wild. Like, yeah, I think the boss fights in particular are better. I think some of the mechanics are better. You have like the open world. You have like, an expansion, right? Like it is it takes everything that Breath of the Wild did and expands on it in an incredibly compelling way. And I don't see most people acknowledging that, right? Like most people I'm seeing right now, YouTubers, The Bit Block, Sean Malmstrom, I'm sure like IGN, or like I'm sure there's like some like people on Twitter like going rampant, like the Snoys, for example. Like it feels like casual audiences, people who aren't like hardcore Nintendo fans, people who aren't like really dedicated. Like there are a lot of like haters, pretendos, snoys, people who are trying to downplay this game, right? Trying to tell you that it's too easy, or that there's something wrong with it, or that it's a rehash. Right now, we're in that weird phase where like people are trying to convince you that the game is bad, or that like it's underwhelming, or that they're disappointed by it. It's not true. Don't believe them. And I think like the fact that this is a sequel to Breath of the Wild and it's had the same reception kind of demonstrates that the narrative that people had about the dungeons, about the shrines, about the open world, like none of that's going to stick, right? Like I think last time people were able to get away with like complaining about like the dungeons in Breath of the Wild, talking about how they weren't as innovative or as cool as like some of the older ones. Now with like Tears of the Kingdom, right? Now you see that dungeons don't need to be like these big, long, epic experiences, right? Like they're relatively short, they're a lot more basic, but they have like, unique aspects to them. They are built into the open world, right? Like, the Wind Temple, getting up to that was like one of the coolest moments in the series for me. It really was like phenomenal. And like, yeah, you can make like statements about how the dungeons aren't great, but you can argue how like the old dungeons were better, but like I don't think it really hampers the experience at all. Like I think there's a very good reason why dungeons are shorter and simpler than they used to be because they aren't the main focus. The main focus is the open world environment. The focus is exploring, discovering things, and making progress in your numerous quests that are running simultaneously. Like there's a focus on like discovering shrines, doing things, like getting armor sets, like getting weapons, learning what best weapons, what fusion weapons are. Like there's so much to do going on. It's honestly a bit overwhelming. Like even now, I feel like in a lot of ways I still haven't taken the time to really dig into like the Sky Islands or like a lot of the underground. Like I've been basically spending my entire week exploring the overworld map where all the quests are and like going through the main story. As of right now, I'm not even sure why I would go into the underground. Like, but there has to be some reason for it. I think there might be like a temple down there, but we'll see. But um, it's just phenomenal, right? Going to this game, like every time I plug it in, oh, do I want to play this game today? Like I have a lot going on. I spend like on average like 6 hours a night playing this, right? Like it really is just an incredible experience, like beyond that of anything we've seen from any other game creator ever, right? And that includes Nintendo, right? Like this game is, in a lot of ways, as good or better than Breath of the Wild. Sure, there are some things that you kind of miss, like some of the old powers and like, but all in all, like I think that Tears of the Kingdom is an improvement over Breath of the Wild in a lot of ways, and I never felt that I would ever say that.